Okay, we are live. Good morning, everyone. It's the Senate Transportation Committee, and we're going to continue our discussion on the transportation bill. But first, we are welcoming Senator McDonald, who has S-121, an act relating to plug-in electric vehicle registration fees. And I thought we might just sneak a few minutes in to get an overview from Senator McDonald before we get into our H 433, the transportation bill. So good morning, Senator McDonald. What do you have for us?
I have a short 2-year bill that would permit the department to collect road use taxes on plug-in electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. Those of us, Senator Perchuk and myself and others, drive around the state of Vermont now with a scarlet F on our foreheads.
Freeloader?
Freeloader, you got it. We do not contribute to road use taxes, and we represent just about 1% of population of vehicles in the state of Vermont, which is not a large percentage, but when it does take off, it's going to take off fairly rapidly. I don't know when that will be. Meanwhile, we're riding around on the roads of the state of Vermont as freeloaders, and we would like to pay our road use taxes just like every other Vermonter. The method is pretty simple to explain and simple to carry out. It's not, it doesn't treat each freeloader. It teaches every freeloader the same. It doesn't link up with how many miles you actually travel, but it collects a sum of money for the average automobile. The bill would start in the statute. In the bill, it says it start next summer, the 1st of July, would last for 2 years. If the department wanted to start it at 6 months or a year earlier, that wouldn't bother me at all, and have it last for 2 years. The way you would calculate the charge is you would look at all the sedans, SUVs, and light trucks in the state of Vermont, see how much they paid in road use taxes, and then you would divide that by the per car charge, what the average car pays, and then when those of us with electric vehicles register our vehicles, we would pay that average charge, whether we used it for long commutes every day or for just Sunday driving. You pay the same charge. Most people who buy electric vehicles do it because they believe it is part of our future, and they're trying to get the citizenry and their neighbors used to having electric vehicles and to see the advantages of them. And I don't think they want to appear as being shirkers when it comes to sharing the cost of the roads. It would be relatively simple to administer for the money it would get back. So that's my pitch. The drafter would give you the details, but that's the proposal.
Senator, my only question would be, right now, we pay on a gallon of gasoline. One, we tax everyone, regardless if they're in-state or out-of-state. Two, it's controlled by miles driven, usage tax. So you're saying this would not be a usage. You could drive 100,000 miles a year or 2,000 miles a year. You would pay the same amount. Is that correct?
Yes.
Questions? Yes, Senator Perchuk.
Yeah, thank you. Senator McDonald, why 2 years, and what happens at the end of that 2 years? They have reevaluated, or?
The idea was to get it started, and for the, my understanding is that the department is welcome to put in a usage tax based on the amount of electricity that you consume to operate your automobile. The designing that program would take longer. would require there be a vast infrastructure that is not yet completed. I guess if someone is buying an electric vehicle simply to avoid the road use taxes, they would smile and be content with the current system. We're not trying to rush the department to collect any faster than they think is the prudent and time to do it when it's cost effective. In the meantime, I believe most EV vehicle owners don't want to be freeloaders.
Yes, Senator Kitchell.
Well, this is something that we've spent a lot of time on and looked at different ways of recognizing the revenue base for transportation is going to have to be redefined as technology and user use. There's been this tension between who's a freeloader versus do you need a time for incentives to encourage the take up and so forth. So there's been some recommendation to that it needs to be done. I guess the question is one of when is the appropriate time. We obviously are concerned about the revenues flowing into the transportation fund and what's the best methodology to use to make sure that regardless of how your vehicle is propelled, you're paying for the support of the infrastructure. So I was just wondering, you were saying your view is the sooner you put something in place, the better. Obviously, the longer you delay, then it creates, when you do put something in, then there are more people to get upset by it. So that's a constant balance. But you came down for sooner is better, I guess, from your comments.
Senator Kitchell, all the things that you listed that your committee would deal with are important and require a lot of consideration. In the meantime, while you're crafting the long-range collection of road use taxes, those of us that drive electric vehicles would like to be contributing. I'm speaking for myself. There may be many who, some who don't, but we'd like to be contributing, and the schedule of when you would come to those decisions would be up to you. You may choose to extend the proposal I've put forth for an extra year. It takes that time. We just don't want to be operating vehicles and driving by and have people go, oh, that's one of those freeloaders that's taking advantage. I don't want to be like them. So.
Yes, Senator Ingalls.
So we spent some time talking about technology, about some electric cars before the meeting, and we talk about cars a lot. I think we have an interest on this committee about technology, and of course we've been talking about everything. I had a pretty good discussion yesterday with VEPSA about how we're going to do this, and the technology. And we're at the infancy. We are on the absolute positively infancy of electric automobiles in this state, and we have a chance to get it right. And the way to do it is what Senator Mazza has already touched upon, is basically if you drive a mile, you're charged a mile and you're paid a mile. And I hear the argument that, oh, well, we just don't have any infrastructure, or we don't have any technology to figure out the way that is. And it's as simple as when you buy a car in the state of Vermont, there's some states that require second plates. There's some that don't. The car manufacturers know that, and they supply the second plate free of charge. Well, they have the opportunity to know that in the state of Vermont, where we're spending millions of dollars to improve the electric car usage or vehicle usage in the state of Vermont, just supply that car with an app that recognizes when you plug it in, it's being charged. And then to get past the part, well, not every home has Wi-Fi. Well, no, but that car has Wi-Fi. And when that car goes along the road someplace, it will send to the electric company the usage amount of what's going to be charged. And Senator McDonald, I appreciate how you feel about that, as far as you don't want to be deemed a freeloader. And consider anybody a freeloader. I mean, I look at it that the infrastructure isn't built yet, and you're doing your part to do what you need to do with the environment. But I think we really have a chance to get this thing right and make it based on not an average of what people use, but what people use. I know in our city right here in Newport, we for years on the residential side of it haven't required water meters. We've just used an average of water meters. Now that they're installing them, they're finding out unbelievable amounts of abuses of how water is being used by not having been metered for all these years. And I think we just have a chance to do this right, slow it down, make the car manufacturers responsible by just simply putting an app in there and charge people for what they're using and not an average of. And that's kind of my take. Long-winded, and I apologize.
Mr. Chair, I couldn't agree with the senator more that he has outlined how it ought to be done. In the example he used, given, those of us that are, aren't being charged, have put forth a suggestion to be charged for road use. And when your committee works out the details in the proposal that in what you believe is the right way to do it, well, then that will take over. In the meantime, there's a lot of water being pumped that isn't being paid for. And when we talk about when our electric car is going to take over, I do not know. There's a famous picture that I think most members of the committee have seen. It's of an intersection somewhere in New York where the streets are just packed with horses and carriages everywhere, and carts and delivery vehicles pulled by horses. And the question says, look for the automobile at this intersection. And there must be 60 or 70 vehicles that you can see there. And then there's another picture taken 13 years later. And when you look at the picture, it says, look for the horse and cart. And every, there's 70 or 80 automobiles. So when it happens, it'll happen quickly. In the meantime, I think this proposal would be easy to administer, would not cost a lot of money, and would collect road use taxes. And certainly you get to the spring and there are Vermonters that wish everybody were paying for the fixing the potholes, et cetera, from the wintertime. And it would make for a smooth transition. So if you ask me any more questions, I'll probably just sort of repeat the same theme. And I think this, yep. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Well, thank you for coming this morning. One of the things that my sources that the best I can get out of Washington is the fact that I think that you're going to see the national infrastructure proposal be based on a mileage tax nationwide. I think that's how they're going to replace the gas tax. That's the best thing I can understand at this point. So I think it will be a national tax on mileage. Now, how that's distributed to states, I don't know how that would work that, but I think the talk in Washington is basically it's going to be a mileage tax on vehicles. So anyway, it's a good start and something we'll consider. And I thank you for coming this morning and we'll continue our discussion. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. My pleasure.
Have a good day. Thank you.
You too.
Senator Chittenden had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see him on the screen. Go right ahead. Speak up because I don't have you on the screen, Senator Chittenden. Go ahead.
No worries. So just Senator McDonald, I wanted to say I definitely appreciate where you're coming from, and I'm not against moving this direction. Any hesitation I'd have is just from what I've heard in this committee about trying to get us to that point where we're starting to look for the horses rather than the cars. And in between this stage, this transition point, I've heard people not wanting to stall electrification, and that additional fees on these things might drag those things down. So that's where I might not be supportive of it now, but just because I want to get to that 15% electrification before we start looking at taxing electric cars or assessing those fees. The other thing I did raise similar to this, and maybe for another discussion, since I don't want you to have to repeat yourself, I do see value in car registration fees and funding a variety of things, especially public transportation. Something I've raised in this committee, the city of South Burlington. I'm a city councilor. We are part of a municipal entity, Green Mountain Transit, and every South Burlingtonian, man, woman, and child, they pay about $28 a year to support public transportation. But there are communities in Vermont that do benefit from public transportation that don't pay anything because they're not part of a municipal entity. I would love a car registration fee, or at least like to look into, if you register a vehicle in a municipality that does not pay for public transportation, you could pay a higher car registration fee in order to support fairly the public transportation that can get people out of their cars, address our transportation climate needs, while also your fee for contributing to congestion on our roadways. I don't know if that ties into what you were thinking with this, but I thought I would put it on the table. And again, thank you for presenting this bill.
Mr. Chair, they all tie together. Your comments, I've just thought, could I make a sign saying I'm driving to California and back for free if this federal thing passes? Boy, I'd be a freeloader that I could coast to coast. And Senator Chittenden, the word stall will begin to shrink as a vocabulary word in the United States as electric vehicles get on the road. You can't stall them.
No, but if they run out of power, they stop.
I heard you can install them in a car wash, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Actually, I saw a Tesla being having to be hauled to the charging station. I guess the driver was a little optimistic.
Ooh. Uh-oh, Senator Perchlik, you hear that? Huh? All right. All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Senator Chittenden, you were referring to town, so I would pay a higher registration in Colchester, even though I don't have public transportation?
Well, Colchester is actually contributing, and they have off and on, but it's always been a negotiation. We're trying to get Colchester into the Green Mountain.
I know you've been trying for years and they don't go. They don't do it. Why?
We're on a 10-year track. We've actually negotiated a plan that Colchester should be joining in the next.
They're waiting for their sewer system first.
That's right. That's, well, I hope we get to, that would be nice to have a sewer system in this largest town in Colchester, the largest town in the state, or second largest or whatever. Well, that's a good discussion, and we're not going to solve it overnight, but every little thought helps. And it certainly is something that's not going to go away. We have to address it sooner rather than later. And because it is going to be a growing factor with all the incentives we're giving out, there will be more electric cars. But right now, I think it's 3,800 out of 500 and some odd thousand. So it's a small percentage, but that doesn't mean it's going to stay there. It's going to continue to grow, and which is a good thing. So I'll make some serious moves when Jane gets hers, and then we can start getting serious about this. But
No, I need, in deference to my age, I probably should just hold out until I get one of those totally self-driving, so that I'm not a risk.
I wouldn't be very comfortable behind the wheel of a car self-driving. I don't think I could handle that.
You might when you're 90.
Yeah, I know. It's true.
Yeah, you don't even know where you're going. It don't matter. It's just nice to get out.
Yeah, just take me home. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. We are going to go back now on H433, and who's Anthea? Are you with us this morning? Who is going to take the next move?
So yes, I'm here this morning with you guys again. So for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. And the document that you have posted that I'm going to do a walkthrough of today, if that works for the committee, are all of the little proposals that the agency has. There's a proposal from Senator Perchlik. This addresses the change in the program name for the incentive program for new PEVs as opposed to the new PEV incentive program. And it also includes the version of the repeal of the Route 4 permit language that is consistent with the direction that the committee asked me to go in back in February. So there's been one slight change from the agency on section 28C that Liz is about to get posted. So I'm just going to pull it up in a PDF program And I apologize in advance. There's a lot of highlighting colors in here to just kind of keep track of where the different proposals came
Oh, I
from.
love colors. That's pretty. Yeah, look at that.
And once, I think the next step is, once the committee goes through and starts closing out sections that don't have any proposed changes to it, or even the sections that do have proposed changes, the next document I'll bring to the committee will be a proposed strike all amendment that we can then do an easy side-by-side with the T-bill as it passed the House. So this is a lot of, but not all of the sections that we've gone through. You'll see in this sort of standalone document that really is just discrete proposals.
Okay.
So if there are any questions, I'll just start at the beginning.
Any questions? No, go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so the first proposed,
What
change-
if I can't remember all those color codes?
I will tell you when we get to it.
Oh, okay.
I love those. colors.
Gray for
Yeah.
Andy.
What color is Jane wearing today? Is red? Okay, red.
I also think this is the capacity of highlighting colors that Word has that are actually visible. So we can't have any, I can't add another color to this. I think 5 is the max.
You notice I'm colored with the Agency of Transportation proposals today with the yellow, okay? So I'm leading the agency, all right? Okay.
Okay, so the first a proposal is coming from me. You'll remember with S66, there was a definition for electric bicycle. This is that definition minus those 3 different classifications. There's been just sort of some logistical issues with, if S66 passes, then you would want to reference the new definition of electric bicycle in the T-bill with respect to the Replace Your Ride program, since an electric bicycle is one of the swaps that's eligible if you choose to keep it in. And same with the $250 incentive for electric bicycles. So instead of having there be confusion about what's being referred to, instead of using bicycle that's electric or motor assisted bicycle with an electric motor, which is the language that passed the House, I think it makes sense to just use the definition here for purposes of those 2 programs. This definition will apply throughout the section, but this isn't adding it to statute. For that to happen, S66 or something like it would still need to be enacted. So that's the first proposed change that I'm suggesting, so that we can then use that term with consistency throughout. The
Okay.
other,
So I'm just wondering, as we're going through, if we agree with this, can we just close it out so we don't have to keep coming back?
Fine with me.
Okay, this is just to make sure that there's consistency in language and definition of an electric bicycle. If S66 doesn't pass, we still have this definition here.
exactly, and it would apply for those 2 programs. And if you end up taking out both of those programs, you don't want to have Replace Your Ride or the e-bike program, then we could take this definition out as well.
What's a bicycle electric motor less than 750 watts? Do they make them 1,000 watts? Or they make them 600 watts or what?
They do make them up to 1,000 watts. That would fall under the definition of motor assisted bicycles in our statute, but
Oh.
that would not be consistent with the federal definition
Okay.
of
Okay.
low speed electric assist bicycle, I think. So this is intended to, and what is in federal law, which is the position that People for Bikes has been taking across the country.
Okay, all right, okay, so everybody's all right with this? Okay, I don't see any no's, and like I said, if I can't see you on the screen, just speak up, because sometimes I don't have you on the, just jump right in. Okay, I think that's a go. All right.
Okay, the other change that you don't see here is in the earlier version of the T-bill that passed the House, there was a definition for multi-unit dwelling or MUD. One of the proposals that you're going to get to at the end of this, or sort of in the middle, is from Senator Perchlik to have that electric vehicle supply equipment grant program that is for multi-unit dwellings be linked to either a multi-unit dwelling that's owned by a nonprofit or affordable multi-unit housing. And those definitions are much larger, specific to that section. So this proposal is just moving them down to that section. So something has been removed, but it's added in a different place. And that takes us through the changes in the definitions. And I will stop this so you can see each other.
Okay, nothing, questions? Okay, I guess it's a go.
Okay. So moving on, the next proposed change that you're going to see, this is from the Agency of Transportation. There is a project that was accidentally included in the wrong program within the agency's proposed transportation program. So this is moving just within the proposed transportation program, that white binder that's adopted and attached to the back of the bill, the project from program development to town highway bridges, and it's the Springfield BF 103449 project. It's Bridge 61 in Springfield, Vermont. So what's happening in subsection A is it's just moving it from program development to town highway bridges. It's not making a change in the authorized spending. And then in subsection B, just specifying again that authorized spending for this project is not modified in any way. And this is just the agency discovered that there was an error in where they had included a project, and it should be in town bridges as opposed to program development.
Any questions, comments? If not, I guess I see it's a go. Okay, thank you.
And then another thing just to mention, this is listed as section 3A for now. When I do the strike all amendment, I'll renumber all of the sections so you don't have anything in this using a letter that doesn't need to. Okay, your next section, and this one is a bit more substantive. It gets its own color. This is the repeal of the US Route 4 permit. This is that zero cost permit for that stretch along Route 4 that goes through Woodstock and some other municipalities. So what's happening in section 3B is it's explaining the General Assembly's intent here, which is not to repeal 23 VSA section 1432 subsection C, which is what creates that permit, under section 3C and 29B. So 3C is the actual repeal where it strikes out and replaces it with repeal. And 29B is the effective date for that language until the Agency of Transportation does a number of things. So what the Agency of Transportation needs to do is work with the town of Woodstock to identify safety concerns related to tractor trailers traveling through the town on US Route 4. And the Agency of Transportation needs to incorporate improvements that the agency, determines in its sole authority are feasible within the town highway right-of-way and scope of work for an existing project in the transportation program, the Woodstock NHPC 215 project, within the agency's proposed fiscal year 2022 transportation program for paving. And then we're getting to sort of some explanation language as to the timing. So the project that has been identified as what the agency would be working with the town of Woodstock to make improvements to the stretch of road that goes through the town is expected to be completed during the summer 2021 construction season. And the agency has not projected any fiscal year 2023 funding for the project. So this is something that should be completable within fiscal year 2022. It'll be happening in this upcoming summer. So having the repeal of 23 VSA section 1432C, that's what creates the permit that you would be getting rid of, having that be effective on July 1 of 2022, so a full fiscal year from now, should provide sufficient time for the agency to work with the town to design and complete the project that has been identified as Woodstock NHPC 21, and for the town to make any additional improvements that it deems necessary. So you're laying out your timeline, you're laying out your justification for your timeline, and you're telling the agency that it needs to work with the town of Woodstock within the parameters of this existing project and make changes in its authority.
Well, what if the town does not agree? Does this go on forever or?
Nope, it is getting repealed under section 3C and 29B on July 1 of 2022, no matter what. So you're laying out, these are the things that should happen, but you are putting into this bill through section 3C, which is striking out everything relating to the permit. And then all the way at the end, when you've got your effective dates, section 3C, the repeal of that language shall take effect on July 1 of 2022. So this language would repeal it. Even if a year from now, the town says, no, you can't repeal it. If you wanted to at that point, you could push it out a further year, but you are putting the gears in motion to repeal that permit in this bill.
Because I want an end date. I want something, because they could prolong this for indefinitely and just come up with a reason why the state hasn't met their needs. And that's what worries me, because they're not going to give up on this. They're going to stretch it as long as they can. And I want an end date. I don't know about any members of the committee, how you feel, but
Well, it seems like we've done that. I think Anthea needs to confirm your concern, but I thought,
well, no, she said that. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything here for to make sure.
even that, I guess, to pick up on the concern, if we repeal it, it's a statutory repeal. Even if the town should say, we don't like it, or you didn't do enough, or whatever.
Right.
It would take subsequent legislative action to do anything to extend beyond the date that you have in this bill.
That's why I want to
Exactly.
make sure. I just want to make sure, because we've kicked this can forever, and I want an end date, and I want some positive language that gets their attention, because they're not going to be happy. They're going to fight this thing right to the very end, because they feel they're singled out. And why they feel that way is because they got away with it all these years, and it's not fair to every other community in Vermont. I feel very strong about this. Every other community could say the same thing. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of communities don't realize what they're getting away with all these years. And I go back to Virgins as a perfect example. The 1,200, 2,000 trucks a day that go through Virgins, and they haven't said, I know they don't like it, but they haven't had the authority that Woodstock has had.
I just think, I'm just very amazed that they haven't been charged in some form or fashion of selective policing when everybody's supposedly concerned about that. And the thing that they've said, well, we know who doesn't have a permit and who don't have a permit. No, you don't know that. You're just stopping vehicles on a whim that you might think that you can harass. Surprised it hasn't been challenged.
No,
But
you're-
Anthea, is 7/1/2022, that's a drop dead date no matter what.
It is. The one thing to just keep in mind is there is another legislative session between now and 7/1/2022. So you might, deal with, please, a year from now saying, push it to 7/1/2023. And then that's something that you could do in a subsequent bill, but you would need to do something else in legislation to deviate from the course that you are now entering upon, which is this is repealed 7/1/2022.
It would take an action of a subsequent legislative session to move that date. So, which could happen. That can happen with just about any legislation. It can be changed by a subsequent legislature.
It could be happening if we made that rule permanent today, right? I mean, not that it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So,
No, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you repealed it effective on passage and the permit went away overnight, you could still have someone from a town coming in next year and saying, add the language back in, and it would take an act of the General Assembly to add it back into statute.
Is Michelle with us this morning?
Yes. Well, we have her photo. Oh, there she is.
Michelle.
I mean,
You're-
she's instantly changed her hairstyle. I don't believe it.
Oh, really? Overnight?
Uh-huh.
We can't say that. We have to be very careful.
Um,
Michelle, your thoughts? I mean, this is a discussion we're having, and I know they're working closely with you folks. And I want to make sure that I know there's some folks that have been discussing it with the agency. And what are your thoughts on this subject?
So Michelle Boomhauer, Vermont Agency of Transportation. We are advancing the enhancements to the paving project that's coming through the village this year. In fact, staff will be in tomorrow to talk about that and to give you some more details. And the secretary did meet with Senator Clarkson on Monday, along with Representative Kimball. And, we went over the fact that we have these improvements to the paving project coming, and that we will be monitoring the outcome of how safely trucks are able to navigate the areas of concern next year after the paving project has been implemented. So we'll do a technical analysis that follows on from the analysis we did a couple of years ago. And if it appears as though there are additional improvements that are needed, then we would initiate a scoping study to look at what other types of solutions we could implement at those two intersections.
So this language is, meet your approval or?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're agnostic with regards to the policy of the committee relative to the permit repeal. But as in terms of the manner in which the language references our project that we're doing to assist Woodstock, the language works for us.
Questions, comments from any member? I don't see anything at this time. I think, okay, does the committee want to respond to this section at this time or pass over to her for now?
I'm a little.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes,
So Senator Kitchell mentioned closing out sections. So I support this language. It seems like the permits have been used to frustrate traffic and not manage it. I don't know what you asked those, Chair Mazza, if that means by closing out, do we vote on that or are we?
well, I know, if we want to return, we can return to anything, but if we can agree at this time that we could pretty much accept it, but it doesn't mean it's closed. Because we're going to vote on the total bill anyway. Something might come up in the next week or so that would raise an issue. But at this point, if someone has some thoughts, but we can at this time just move on and say it looks good, and we can somewhat close it out. But it's always open to the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with the language the way it
Okay.
is there.
All right. Okay. Let's move on.
Well,
And,
Wait, Senator Perchlik.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We are taking testimony on this on the agenda tomorrow, so I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. We're still open. Sure. Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead. Well, Anthea, we'll move on.
So moving on to your next section, no proposed changes right now to sections 4 to 7. The changes that you see starting in section 8, this is changing the name of the program. So instead of it being the new PEV incentive program, it will be called the Incentive Program for New PEVs. So that language is changed throughout the session law, which is should the fiscal year 2022 authorization. I will just mention here.
Should we be using PEVs or should we, I guess it's probably a definition somewhere else. It just seems, I'm not sure would everybody know what a PEV is? And should the heading at least have the full rather than the acronym?
So we certainly could put it in the heading. This is sort of the name of the program and it is named in session law. One of the things you always have in the T-bill now, at least for the last 3 years, is in the definition section, you define plug-in electric vehicle, PEV, plug-in hybrid electrical, PHEV, and battery electric, BEV, as having the same meanings as in 23 VSA section 485. So you are providing it in like the very first page of the T-bill. This is this acronym, this is what it means, and this is where you can find the.
Okay, all right. So there's a prior reference to the term, all right, and how it's defined.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so that's changing the language.
Yes, Senator Perchlik, I'm sorry.
Did you say that we had 3? We had plug-in electric, plug-in hybrid, and battery electric?
So plug-in electric vehicle is your overarching definition that covers both PHEV and battery electric vehicle. So when you say PEV, you're referring to the plug-in hybrid and then the ones that are plug-in but full electric, battery electric.
Again, I thought there were 3 distinct, but it's okay.
And the way the definition is laid out in 23 VSA section 4 subdivision 85 is it defines plug-in electric vehicle and then it says which includes, and then it's got a separate subdivision for each of those to define plug-in hybrid and battery electric.
Okay, thanks.
One of them is a propane tank you carry with you, 100 gallon tank. So. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, So I know that it's still something that the committee is thinking about, but with what Senator Kitchell has mentioned in previous meetings about how if this program is going to run out of funding, to have the appropriation apply earlier, it would probably be in Section 8 that we would make some modifications to allow that money to be spent prior to fiscal year 2022. So just putting that on your radar screen, this is where I think this change would be. The rest of the changes that you have in this, there are no other changes in Section 8. I think it makes sense to swap the order of Section 9 and Section 10. Section 9 is the language that, or currently Section 10 is the language that deals with the repeal of the requirement that the program be administered through those no-cost contracts with the electric distribution utilities. I think it makes sense from a readability standpoint to have that language come right after where you are authorizing the not more than 10% for administrative costs. So I just think that that is a swap in ordering that makes sense. And then you'll see some more changes to the name of the program. And this is the changes in actual session law that created the program back in 2019. And I will then pause there since that's a sort of discrete piece to discuss.
Okay, Senator Chittenden.
But at some point in this conversation today, I don't know if this is the best one, there is a small amendment that I've been working with REV and I passed it by Michelle Boomhauer to get the AOT's reaction. Is this the section, Anthea, that you think it would go in, and should that conversation be today or at a later time?
I think probably when you want to talk about it, I only looked at it quickly, but it has to do with the charging stations, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I think you probably want to talk about it when we get to the EVSE grant program. Electric vehicle supply equipment is the technical term for charging stations. But you know, it's up to you when you want to talk about it. I just haven't had a chance to work on the language yet.
You tell me when that section is, I'll jump in. Thanks.
Okay. Questions, comments? I'm seeing none, hearing none. Okay, we'll move on.
Okay. So the next change that you're going to see is to the actual implementation of the program. I think you've heard the agency mention this. Under the way that the language is currently in session law for purposes of the incentive program for new PEVs, it says that an incentive is provided. It is not more than one incentive. And then you either qualify through your adjusted gross income as an individual or your adjusted gross income as a married couple. What the agency is proposing is to say every individual can get an incentive. So if there was a married couple, both parties would be able to take advantage of this program. So the married couple could get 2 incentives, and that this is an incentive per individual per year. So instead of it being one sort of for the lifetime that the program exists, you could get one in 2022, one in 2023, provided that the program continues to exist. So you will see as we go through this language, a number of instances where we're including per individual per year in this batch of proposals. And then when we get down to the piece where it's talking about income eligibility qualification as a married couple, it would be an individual who is part of a married couple to account for the fact that both individuals in that married couple would be able to get an incentive. So that is a policy change proposal from the agency.
Questions? Comments, anyone? Okay. Yes,
Senator Mazza,
yes, go ahead.
if I may.
Yes,
So I just want to give a little background on this suggested change. We had a few instances over the past year whereby in one case, a person early in the program when we first introduced it had used the incentive program to purchase a vehicle, and that vehicle, actually they leased the vehicle, and it had a mileage range that I don't remember, it was probably 80 miles on a charge. And then they changed jobs, and their job was located much further from their home. And so they needed to change their electric vehicle in order to make it to their workplace. And And so it just didn't seem right to penalize the person for transient circumstances. And additionally, the vehicle that they turned in then becomes part of our used vehicle market or released vehicle market, I guess. I'm not sure how it works. So there, there could be positive outcomes. Additionally, a household where maybe there are more than one person in the household, but they, maybe they're a lower income household, and having an electric vehicle by both persons within the household, or if there's a driver that's a young adult or, happens to be living with their parents, wouldn't we want them to be able to take advantage of transportation cost savings? And so that's how we came up with this recommendation.
Okay. Any questions for Michelle? All right, we're ahead. Okay.
Okay, I will put the share screen back up. Okay, so that's going to be the per individual per year. Individual is part of a married couple. You'll see that change many, many times. The last proposed change in this section dealing with adjusted gross income and incentives for the incentive program for new PEVs is, you'll remember that part of what was included in the T-bill as it came over from the House was changing within that chart. And I put up, and it had, the 50,000 threshold moving up to 75,000 for married couple and the surviving spouse qualifications, shifting that so that it was $75,000 and under got you that larger incentive, and then $75,000 up to $125,000 got you the lower incentive. There was one 50,000 that was struck out that should have stayed at 50,000 and not be changed to 75,000. The agency, I think it was actually Dave Roberts from Drive Electric who caught it. So much appreciation to him for catching that. That was simply a drafting error. And that is corrected by keeping the $50,000 that you see on page 8, line 1 as 50,000 and not striking it out and changing it to 75,000. So the chart that I showed you was correct. The language that the chart was explaining, there was one 50,000 that needed to stay at 50,000, not changed to 75.
Okay.
And then the next policy proposal change that you are getting from the Agency of Transportation is, up until now, the incentive program for new PEVs has been for individuals. This would be expanding it to provide in subdivision 4, lines 2 down to 5, to provide not more than 5 incentives of either $3,000 for a plug-in hybrid or $4,000 for a battery electric, or a combination thereof. So you could get 2 plug-in hybrid and 3 battery electric, for example, to a tax-exempt organization incorporated in the state for the purpose of providing Vermonters with transportation alternatives to personal vehicle ownership. So there would be a new group that would be eligible for incentives under this program, and they would be tax-exempt organizations that exist and are incorporated in Vermont to provide transportation alternatives, and they would be able to get up to 5 incentives of these amounts for these types of vehicles. So again, this is a policy change proposal from the agency, and I will pause there.
So
Go ahead, Jane. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, tax exempt, would, for example, public transit, they do I don't know, would we provide an incentive? Would this be in addition to them, or what nonprofits were being envisioned here? And it, obviously public transit's funded a different mechanism. So this is more along household, but this adds a nonprofit. So I'm just trying to think about what situation you're attempting to address here.
Thank you, Senator Kitchell. Senator Mazza, if I may, this would not apply to the public transit agencies because we do work with them in a separate framework to provide them, funding for these types of activities. This would be targeted towards a car sharing organization whereby we are trying to get folks to reduce the number of vehicles within their household by potentially using a car sharing option. And this would enable us to work with a car sharing organization to give them a reduction in the cost of them purchasing an electric vehicle for use by their customers here in Vermont.
So if you had a nonprofit childcare program that wanted a vehicle,
Well, yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, actually,
you
it
know,
is a
I'm
good
just, I'm
example.
just trying to get a
Yep.
sense of
Yep. Mhm.
who might be out there. I know that they're,
You can open a childcare, Jane?
what?
You can open a nonprofit childcare center?
Yeah, but the only problem with childcare is it involves children. But I'm kind of past that. No, I was just trying to think about, what organization might
Yeah.
consider coming through that door. And so I was just thinking about nonprofits in a very broad way, which this could be, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point that there are nonprofits who provide transportation services like childcare, like elder care.
Right.
And I think the other thing we probably want to add into this language is the 5 incentives per year. So it's not like 5 incentives forever, would be maybe an addition to that.
When I saw on the screen, manufactured price, $40,000, is that the manufacturer sticker you go by, or is that the dealer's? Say the dealer has a car for 43,000, he wants to sell it for 40,000. Is that, they use that price, or they use this, it has to be the sticker the manufacturer suggested retail?
Yeah, manufacturers suggested retail.
Okay, okay. 'Cause
And
there's-
Michelle, did you say there was like almost, I apologize. I don't even want to throw the number out there. I think at one time during testimony, you had a number of cars that you thought were under that 40,000, and maybe it wasn't you, but I thought I remember hearing like there was over 20 or 25 cars or vehicles in that.
Yeah, I
Under-
can't remember if the number is that high, Senator Ingalls. If you go to the Drive Electric Vermont site,
Yeah.
they will show you all the eligible models that you can get to get with the under 40,000. And I'll send a link in the chat so you can get right to that site.
Thank you.
Senator Mather.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I want to point out to people that it is the base MSRP. So like you could get a Bolt that cost $48,000, but if the base model is $39,900, it still counts. So it's the base model has to be under 40, even if the car ends up having an MSRP at 44, because you got, extra, the elite model or something, it still qualifies.
So it isn't 40,000, that it could be higher.
It could, but as long as the base manufacturer's MSRP is under 40. So it has
For
to
that, for that particular vehicle type.
for that model. Yeah. So like
Yeah.
you can get a Bolt for 39,000, but you can also get a Bolt for 49,000 if you get all the bells and whistles.
Huh. That's interesting. I thought it was a total price. So that is not correct. And it doesn't say, it says manufacturer suggested retail.
Base manufacturer
Is
suggested.
there a base on there in that language?
Yep.
I just sort of highlighted it and highlighted it. It's on line 6 of what's up on the
Oh,
screen.
I see that. Wow. So that's a big difference. And you could go up to $50,000 on a car. Because nobody buys a base car. I mean, I don't even know if they sell a base car anymore.
Well, and maybe, to Senator Kitchell's question is like, if you're doing this would be one of the examples for where this section 4 would come in is like Car Share Vermont, which is a nonprofit that has several cars. So they have an interest of having electric cars as part of their fleet. And they're more likely to get a base car, I would say, than a fancier one. But that's, and I support this. I think this avoids having, a high level Tesla S ever qualifying, but there are the Tesla 3 does because you can get under 40 at the base price.
That puts a new spin on it. I didn't realize that. I don't know if I like that or not. I got to think about that because I don't know. It's are
Well, the
we?
incentive stays the same, so the person's taking on more debt for their choice for whatever gets added,
And
right?
if you did it just with a base card, then Dave Roberts gave us that list of the cars. If you just said the actual price, then you're going to really narrow it down to a very few vehicles. But like there's more cars because of this base thing than if you just said a price of 40K.
And that's existing policy.
Yeah,
The way it's been running.
yep. You have had it at the base MSRP of 40,000 ever since the program was created. I believe the original proposal had it at 35,000, and that was changed in 2019 when you created the program. The other thing that stays the same is the adjusted gross income to qualify. So it's not like if you're trying to qualify for a more expensive car, your adjusted gross income can be higher. It's still capped at the same without regard to what vehicle you want the incentive to go towards. So the incentive state holds steady and the adjusted gross income levels to qualify hold steady.
Well, it's all about the base. There you go. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So the other small change that you see in this section is just because you're adding a new subdivision 4, changing existing subdivision 4 to subdivision 5. That's the one we were just talking about, the existing law on the MSRP, and then repealing language that was currently subdivision 5 that is no longer applicable. It had to do with fiscal year 2021. So that gets us through everything on the incentive program for new PEVs. Moving on to Mileage Smart. So to refresh the committee's memory, for purposes of Mileage Smart and the language that came out of the House, there wasn't going to be any changes to the program. It was going to be an additional authorization of 600,000 coupled with the estimated carry forward. That was going to give the Mileage Smart program about, and I'm using really round numbers here, about $1 million to give out in incentives in fiscal year 2022. And then the language that passed the House said up to 10% of the total amount that is distributed in incentives. That's where the 10% pulled from. So it could be up to 10% of the carry forward plus the new authorization, not just up to 10% of the new $600,000 authorization. The intent from the committee, from their discussions, was always to have it apply to the full amount. I think it's written to apply to the full amount because it says it's the total amount that is distributed in incentives. It's not linked to the authorization. But the agency, I believe at the request of Capstone, just wants some, I would call this belts and suspenders language, saying very clearly it's the amount that's distributed in incentives in fiscal year 2022. That's on line 16. And then you're specifically pulling in to that total amount, including incentive funding authorized by this section and incentive funding carried over from prior fiscal years pursuant to, and then linking back to the language that had that original carry forward from about a year ago as amended. So it's specifically saying this 10% will apply to the total amount that's distributed in incentives. And then just to be clear, it's what's distributed in fiscal year 2022, and it can come from the carry forward, and it can come from this new $600,000 authorization. So I think you were just being extra super clear with this highlighted language on what was always the intent with using the 10% of the total amount that is distributed and not using 10% of the authorization as your administrative costs cap.
Senator Mazza.
Yes, go right ahead. Yep.
On this section, I really like the Mileage Smart program. I think it's the one program that we have that's really helping Vermonters deal with their transportation problems, and especially those that are kind of struggling in poverty. And they had testified that the 600,000 wouldn't take them through the next fiscal year or through the end of this, no, I guess through next fiscal year, and it asked for more money. So I wondered when we would kind of have that discussion. So I would like to move them up to at least 750,000, if not $1 million. So something just to highlight about this program.
Okay, we'll get back to that and discuss it then. Okay.
Yeah, there was concern based on a particular month, 2 months of spending, that the current appropriation would not get through this fiscal year. And which then raises the question of the 750, or how much is needed for the full upcoming fiscal year. And so upon passage would deal with making sure that we don't have to shut down the program before July 1st. But I think it begs the larger question about, based on the most current experience, is the 750 levels sufficient, particularly in light of the fact that we're possibly advancing some of that, say in mid-May to July 1st.
4 or 5 years. I never worn it.
Is someone talking?
No,
Oh, I thought I heard a female voice,
it's not me.
and it's
I
not
did too.
mine.
That I did too.
So I do think we need to, if we want to make that effective upon passage, we also have to look at probably the adequacy of the projected amount. And maybe that's something that we're going to have to talk about, because that would require swapping out a bit more of the general fund out of maintenance and replacing it with the federal dollars.
Right, or moving it from somewhere, but yeah.
Mhm. Well, yeah. Well, if you want to use federal dollars to support it, then you've got to.
Right.
Ultimately, you've got to convert it to general fund, unless, Michelle, the governor's come out, with how he wants to spend the ARPA money. Obviously, we have some differences of opinion on some, because of areas that he's not recommending any funding. But does that proposal tie into this at all?
Using ARPA funds for this purpose, I think would be an eligible activity. And I have not yet seen the details relative to the various incentive programs, but I would suspect that we would support all of the incentive programs with the governor's proposed funding levels. And as soon as I have more on those details, I'll certainly be interested in sharing them with you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to know, out of the recommended 372 million, whether one of the 5 buckets, which got into the climate change, would connect to this discussion. The other point that I bring out to the committee is, in the proposal is setting aside 100 million of the 1 billion specifically for support of the climate action plan that would be completed in December. And obviously, there are going to be recommendations about the transportation sector. How can you have a carbon reduction plan that doesn't address transportation, which is the largest emission sector in the state, followed by thermal efficiencies or home heating and buildings. So I can't help but believe that we're going to be getting some recommendations on transportation and as part of that plan recommendation. So that's just another connecting point out there as well, is what will that plan advance for recommendations relative to transportation once it comes out in December.
And Mazza,
Yeah, go right ahead.
on that, which is, we're getting off the bill a little bit, but I wondered AOT. Michelle, would you be able to give more detail, or maybe the detail just isn't there? Because I did look at the governor's announcement, and there's like, it says like electrification infrastructure, but then it also has like a separate, I think, for EVSE. So I wasn't sure kind of how those buckets were being defined. Some of them seem like they might overlap, and maybe that's by design. So I wondered if we would be able to, if you or AOT would be able to give us a, I know it's not, the details aren't there, but just a better idea of the transportation's parts of that, the governor's proposal.
Yeah, so the specific transportation parts of the proposal have to do with electric vehicle charging infrastructure, electric vehicle incentives, and sorry, I feel like there's one other section that's,
And we could do it another day. I just thought.
yeah, but those were the two principal ones.
But I simply will state again, that's what's being recommended out of the billion, but it can, obviously, it's a recommendation that we can modify or add or, subtract or whatever. So
It's so strange to hear $1 billion now. It is so unusual to hear that kind of figures being thrown out.
yeah, but don't forget, we actually have appropriated and allocated 1.25 billion.
I know.
Already.
It's just wild to think of these
So-
numbers. Wow.
So 372, man, I could go through that probably in a day or two if you wanted to let me work it out. But I would say that it seems like ARPA is more flexible than the CRF as it would relate to so much of this is all infrastructure related, as opposed to necessarily COVID.
Okay. Very, very big subject.
Well, it is, I guess, ultimately,
Great,
maybe we would know if we want to increase the spending, then how we would, what it would be and what would be the funding source recommended.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Anthea.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, as the Mileage Smart program and the language came out of the House, there were no changes to the program itself. It was just the increased authorization. You're now in section 11A, getting a proposed change to the Mileage Smart program. So currently in session law, this is how it's been since 2019 when the program was created. The Mileage Smart program provides a point of sale voucher through the state's network of community action agencies, and that is basing the eligibility for the voucher on the same criteria that's used for income qualification for weatherization services through the weatherization program, which is based on 80% of either state or area median income. The proposed policy change is to, instead of linking it to weatherization with those two different pieces, having it be setting income eligibility at 80% of the state median income. So that would be a proposed policy change to how the program is administered.
How does 80% compare to weatherization? I don't.
So my understanding of weatherization is
It's lower, probably.
It could be lower because it could be linked to area median income. So this is using the same qualification across the state at 80% of state median income. And I saw Michelle nodding, so I clearly didn't butcher it too badly.
Yeah, and just to sort of further amplify what Anthea pointed out, I think there was concern by Capstone that linking transportation program to weatherization eligibility created issues within the criteria relevant, which is relevant to homes, not cars. And in fact, under the current program, it would allow higher income Chittenden County folks to get an incentive where the median income is higher than in, say, the Northeast Kingdom, where they don't have as many transportation options. They're probably driving further for work, et cetera. So being able to equalize this at the statewide median income level was not only administratively more efficient, but also I think would open the program to folks who maybe need the resource more.
Yes, Senator.
As a Chittenden County Senator, I just want to be sure that that would still allow those in Chittenden County that are at 80% or less of the median poverty level still have access to this. So it's not necessarily hurting Chittenden County more so than the other community, right?
Yes, Chittenden County residents would still have access. There might be some, if the Chittenden County average area median income is higher currently than the statewide average, which it probably is, there will be some folks that might be excluded from the Mileage Smart program, but hopefully they obviously would still qualify for the PEV incentive program.
Just make sure real estate folks from Northeast Kingdom get on this program.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know the truth. Okay. All right, go right ahead. Questions? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So that takes us through the Mileage Smart changes. There are no proposed changes in this document to sections 12 to 15. That's the emissions repair program piece. That's pulling it out of the Mileage Smart program and having it as its standalone piece. And then the 375,000 there.
Yes, go right ahead. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, Anthea. The emissions program on one of the side-by-sides that I saw from RUP's attachments didn't show the governor's proposal have any money for emissions, and I thought it was the governor that was proposing that we keep mileage. No, so if it was up to the governor, he would just get rid of the emissions program. Is that right, Michelle?
We did not propose any funding for creating an emissions repair program within the governor's recommended budget.
It would just die out like it is now.
It never would start.
That was your proposal.
Our proposal did not include a continuation of the emissions repair program. The House asked what it would cost to continue the emissions repair program. And that's where they came up with the resource identification after we provided them that information.
Start and then based on their 350,000 AOT state thing, it would.
We're losing you.
We're losing you, Andy. You're frozen in time. I guess the question, Michelle, is that we had trouble with the first design. It wasn't operationally possible to put together. Was there testament? Is the replacement if we ended up funding it, is it viewed as a more viable way of addressing this need?
So we actually have folks coming in on Friday morning to testify on this. So if it's okay with you, I'll reserve.
Okay. All right, that would be fun. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't want to replace a program that wasn't viable with another program that turns, there's a high probability it's not viable either.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, you're back live.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Continue.
So that takes us now to Replace Your Ride program. This is the one that's got the income eligibility and then also the removal of the vehicle. And then there are incentives available for modes of transportation that emit fewer greenhouse gas emissions. There is a few proposals from the agency in terms of changes here. The first is following along with the proposed changes for the new PEV incentive program, is having the incentives be available to individuals, not to an individual or a married couple. So it could be both individuals there. So you'll see highlighted blank spaces. That's where or married couple has been removed in a few places. One thing to keep in mind with this program is this is still not expanding beyond one incentive per individual. So there's not that per year language here. This would be an incentive per individual or 2 incentives for 2 individuals and a married couple, but it's not like they could get an incentive under this program in 23, 24, 25, however long the program existed. So that would be a difference between the 2 programs. So you'll see a number of places where or married couple is removed, proposed to be removed. That same language where for the income eligibility qualification piece that's linked to adjusted gross income of the married couple, it's an individual who is part of a married couple. And then the other change you'll see with respect to this language, I'm going to skip over this for a second, is when we get to the applicant piece, it used to say is currently titled in the name of an applicant, which could be titled in 1 or 2 of the individuals in that married couple. This would be titled in the name of the applicant, since it's now individual specific. The other proposed policy change with respect to qualification is much like you saw in the mileage smart change, having it be set at 80% of state median income, because one of the ways that you would be able to qualify for the Replace Your Ride program is through the same income qualification tiers as mileage smart. This language is also being changed to reflect that shift. It used to say, which is set on qualification for weatherization under the weatherization program. So it's tracking the change in the mileage smart program to set it at 80% of state median income. The other proposed changes that you'll see in the Replace Your Ride program have to do with those eligible swaps. The first one is the usage of electric bicycle. That's a proposal for me, just to be consistent with the use of that definition that you're adding. It's hard to tell from the way this is structured, but there's also a proposed change to have it also be an incentive that's available to purchase a bicycle, whether or not it's electric or otherwise. So the language that came out of the House said a bicycle or motorcycle that was fully electric. This would now have the incentive be available for a new or used bicycle with no electric motor whatsoever. An electric bicycle, as you're defining it, that 750 wattage mark, or a motorcycle that's fully electric. So there would now be 3 things under this one subdivision: bicycle, electric bicycle, fully electric motorcycle. And then the other policy proposal change here is to also have the incentive go towards any necessary safety equipment to use the bicycle, electric bicycle, or motorcycle. And that will get you through the changes for Replace Your Ride.
Would
Yes,
safety equipment be more than what is needed on the bicycle? Would it include helmets that have the lights? I mean, I'm assuming it would be. I assume it wouldn't, be the spandex
big helmets.
clothing, but it might be lighting or, well, it could be some clothing because of a reflective material and so forth on some of them. I was just wondering how, what that included. So it could be more than what's on the bicycle itself.
Yeah, so my reading of the language is necessary safety equipment. You could include something there, necessary safety equipment for the rider and the vehicle. One of the things just to remember here is this program and the language that you have in the bill is proposed to be added as session law does not have all of the details of the program, and that's going to get fleshed out through the program guidelines when this actually gets to the point of implementation. But you certainly could provide some further clarification on it being safety equipment both for the vehicle and for the user of the vehicle, to be clear on what the legislature's intent is there.
Yes, Senator Perchlik, go right ahead.
Anthea, can you explain how this and then the other section, which we haven't got to, I don't think, on the 50,000 for electric bikes, how those because if this is up to $3,000, there are electric bikes that are more, but it seems like this would cover most of the costs, if not all the costs. And is that other program just not income sensitized?
So Replace Your Ride is designed, and I know that the presentation you had on it gave some really great examples of the stacking. So the Replace Your Ride program can be stacked on both the PEV incentive program or Mileage Smart.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then the electric bicycle program is like discrete, standalone. It is based on income. It's based on a self-certification income that you qualify for any tier of incentive under the new PEV and the incentive program for new PEVs. Replace Your Ride is linked to the lower income, higher incentive qualification. So it would be possible for someone to get the Replace Your Ride electric bicycle incentive and the electric bicycle incentive, $200. One thing to remember with Replace Your Ride is the incentives are up to $3,000. They're not exclusively $3,000. So it could be that when the program is actually implemented, there are tiers of incentives. So maybe if you're getting a new electric vehicle, that's a $3,000 incentive, whereas getting an electric bicycle, it might not be $3,000. So
It would be up to them to decide the percentage of the, so if the bike costs $3,000, the way it's written, they could give 100%, but they could also say, we're only going to give you 50% of the purchase price.
So the way it's written, it's given a lot of flexibility to the agency in consultation with whoever administers the program to have incentives be from 0 to 3,000. It's not a set discrete amount.
Or 0 to 100% of the purchase price. And
If that's how they end up choosing to implement the program. And if you wanted to, you certainly could give them more guidance as to how it is.
And they could, theoretically, the way it's written, somebody could get the 100%, get the $3,000 for an electric bike and the $200 from the other program. So they could get,
Yeah, it's stackable.
well, we just want to make sure it's not stackable over 100% of the purchase price.
Well, that's, yeah,
And
that would be quite an incentive, wouldn't it?
You're almost going to have to take a
Apply
course
for
to
those.
figure out all the incentives that are out there. I don't know who's
No, nobody.
the consumer. Wow, it's unbelievable how many different programs. Who will explain that? The dealers will explain it to the purchasers, people that want to buy these things.
So there'll be a lot of education and outreach and
Yeah.
materials available, depending on what sector is assisting us with these. It's going to take a lot of education, you're right.
Because of, the average person looking,
Mhm.
shopping, there's going to be so many choices out there. Wow, it's going to be,
But ultimately, won't it be, Michelle, on the dealers who choose to allow these incentives? And that could be if they didn't follow the rules, that they gave up money that they shouldn't have gave up.
Yeah, so we do qualify the dealers, and it'll probably be similar for bike shops or whatever that are participating in the program, as where folks could go to get an incentive, and there's training that we do for them, et cetera, so that they're not like giving away an incentive they shouldn't have given away, that sort of thing. So, I do have a question for Anthea related to whether a vehicle is registered to an individual or a couple, because I was thinking about oftentimes a married couple will register a car or their own, however many cars they have in both their names. And so if they want to give up one of their cars that's eligible for the Replace Your Ride program, could they still, with this language, and obviously both of them have to sign off on getting rid of the car, could they still get rid of the car and be eligible for the program?
I think so, because it doesn't say is currently solely titled in the name of the applicant.
Okay.
It just needs to be titled in the name of the applicant. So I think it would be either, if you had multiple owners on the title, it would be fine with this language.
Thank
I think if
you.
you had solely titled, then you might run into, or something like it, you might run into problems.
Okay.
I think that's consistent with the intent that it would be either individual on the title.
So I'm just trying to get back and to qualify, you're going to have to give up your vehicle. So if we replace it with a bicycle or an electric bike, people are either committing to biking year round, regardless of the weather, getting or relying on a replacement ride or something else. I'm just wondering, it seems to me that when you consider the climate of Vermont, it's got to be a multiple approach. If I'm giving up my vehicle, I might have to carpool or take
Yep.
public transit or something for part of the year. Is that the thinking here? In
Yes,
terms of how this might work?
you're correct, Senator Kitchell. So we would take that
No, you can't
bundle.
say that anymore.
Oh, no, come on now, Michelle, you promised you weren't going to continue this, you know what I mean? She's correct again. Gosh, you know.
I'm gonna have to get my,
Well, I could see
Thesaurus
myself
out.
peddling,
Gosh,
you know,
I've been here 50 years. She hasn't told me I'm correct yet, you know?
Well, maybe someday you will be.
something to look forward to, Senator Mosen.
Okay, thank you.
Keep working hard. Another 50.
So we have the bundle of $3,000 of incentives that you're getting for turning in your internal combustion engine. And we would structure that package based on the individual situation. So
Okay.
maybe there's somebody that lives in a village that has transit service and they have a link bus that goes somewhere, but they want to also be able to have a bike to get around town to do their errands. And so, we might give them some transit pass, swipe card, help them purchase an electric bike. If they have a car share service there in town, we might give them a swipe card for car share service or that sort of thing.
yeah,
So-
I know some of the buses actually have racks for bikes for passengers. So
Exactly.
okay.
Do we know the percentage of people that I suppose that's a pretty hard question to ask. Who rides bikes and doesn't have vehicles, but that'd be hard to figure out.
Well, Kurt McCormick was one.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have a car anymore.
No, they do exist. I can think of some in my community that just have bikes and they rely on zip cars or rental cars when they really need to transport heavy things. So
I got one in the garage, Been there for quite a while, but anyway. Any other? How are we doing? All right? Go ahead, Anthea.
Okay, so the last of our vehicle incentive programs, no change to the structure of the program as it was proposed by the House, but instead it's just using that definition of electric bicycle, and this is for the electric bike incentive. So it would be $200 for 250 individuals who purchase a new electric bicycle.
I think we're going to have someone come on and tell us what the safety bicycles, what you have to do for the highways, and that's something that was brought up the other day, and I look forward to hearing that. If we're going to incentivize bikes, I just want to make sure they're all aware of what the law of the land is, and make sure they're, because I still question if they're following all the rules and regulations on bicycles.
Well, maybe we should, I don't know. I mean, it raises the question if someone is getting an incentive, the extent to which information is provided around safety and legal requirements that come with it. I realize ignorance of the law is no excuse, but sometimes it's hard to understand or know. So maybe there should be some connection to make sure that anyone who is routinely, which seems like would be the case here, would be using a bicycle would be, if there's some way of connecting the incentive with that, their legal, the legal requirements of operation.
There's a mixed message out there, and I know all of us have heard the same thing. Why don't we register bicycles? Well, I mean, that's been around for a long time, and I don't think that's going to happen. But on the other hand, I just like to make sure they're all following the same safety guidelines, and because I think it's mixed out there now, as you see on the highways. There's more and more bikes, and I encourage that. That's great. But I also want to make sure they're safe. They're abiding by the rules and regulations, whether you drive in traffic or alongside traffic. And but we'll have, I think, one of the companies are coming in and explain what their safety program is, and which is good, just to get an update. I would feel more comfortable with that, knowing that they're going through some sort of, not a course you have to pass, but because we do it on hunter safety and different things like that. I just want to make sure we're doing our part. Okay, anything else at this point?
There's a few more sections to get through.
Okay, all right.
So the only other change with the electric bicycles is using the name of the program, incentive program for new PEVs. Now we're getting to Senator Perchlik's proposed changes for the EVSE grant program. So as it was proposed and passed the House, this was going to be a grant program for charging stations at multi-unit dwellings, which was defined in the T-bill. Instead, and I'm going to scroll down before I go to the definitions, the grants would be available for the continued build out of electric vehicle supply equipment for charging stations at multi-unit affordable housing and multi-unit dwellings owned by a nonprofit. Both multi-unit affordable housing and multi-unit dwellings owned by a nonprofit will be defined. And those definitions are, for purposes of multi-unit affordable housing, it's a housing project such as cooperatives, condominiums, dwellings, or mobile home parks with 10 or more units. That's the same threshold that was included in the T-bill as it passed the House. Constructed or maintained on a tract or tracts of land where, and then this is the new piece, the linkage to affordability. At least 50% of the units are or will be occupied by households whose income does not exceed 100% of the greater of the state or area median income. And we have a definition of area median income, which is the county or MSA median income published by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. So it would need to be at least 50%, not exceeding 100% of the larger of those two. Or, and the second way that you would qualify under this multi-unit affordable housing definition is that all units are affordable to households earning between 60 and 120% of area median income. And this is to capture what I believe you heard testimony on workforce affordability. And then the definition for multi-unit dwellings owned by a nonprofit, it's that same threshold, 10 or more units, following what you have in the definition above. But this time it also requires owned by a person that has nonprofit status under Section 501c3 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code and is registered as a nonprofit corporation with the Office of Secretary of State. So these would be the different types of housing that would then qualify for a grant under the program, but the balance of the program stays the same. So Senator Perchlik is proposing to narrow and provide more specificity on who would be eligible for a grant under this program. And I'm going to stop my share here, and I'm going to provide a reminder to Senator Chittenden that I think this is where your language would fit in, since it has to do with criteria for these grants.
So really quick, I'll just put this on the radar, and I know I need to hear back from Michelle Boomhauer. Thank you, Michelle, for any thoughts you can offer on this. I know I just sent it to you last night. I connected with REV, and they just had a very small adjustment they wanted to have our committee consider, which has to do with making agnostic the requirements for the payment types, physical median connection types for the payments for these charging stations. I guess they're somewhere in the state statute where it requires a magnetic strip. For those, you all know that credit cards these days, you can insert them, you can swipe them, you can tap them, you can also pay with your phone. And there's also abilities to credential a electric vehicle based on when you plug it in, so it can actually identify the car. So all they're encouraging, and I sent the language to Michelle Boomhauer to hear her thoughts. I doubt that you're ready to offer any thoughts today on it, but I want to put it on the radar of the committee that they're just asking that we make agnostic, with no hard-coded requirement for a hard swipe, credit card swipe, because that has all sorts of issues with elements. So they just want it to be flexible, and they want state statute to be agnostic and not have specific requirements for the types of median of payments, because it's holding back some innovative applications for electric cars. It seems reasonable. It's a single line. I'll just put it out there that I guess I'm hoping if as long as Michelle Boomhauer doesn't say this is a terrible idea and just stop this conversation immediately, then I'll bring back some language on it after I talk to you.
Now that Michelle will say that's a great idea. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well,
You're correct, Senator.
You're correct.
you're actually incorrect on that one,
Oh.
Senator.
Anybody seen any of these? They're still around, you know. Just in case.
So I was able to collect a little more information on the background on this. We have an interagency team that has been working on the grant guidance for the EV charging stations. And the state's decision to require swipe or chip readers on stations is based on regional guidance that we developed as part of our partnership with NESCOM, which is the New England States Air Quality Group that is very involved with EV policy setting, and along with our other regional partners of states. The idea behind this requirement is mostly based on accessibility, but here are some of the additional elements. In the early stages of EV adoption, it's critical that we remove all the barriers to successful use. And we've talked about this before. And at this stage, any negative experience with charging spreads like wildfire on social media, and folks get discouraged. And then EV opponents argue that driving an EV is not easy and accessible to everyone. And so even though there are developments in payment technology, as you mentioned, Senator Chittenden, that have created many different ways of paying for things, the most common form currently is still credit card, swipe, or chip. And if an EV driver pulls up to the charging station and they can't use their credit card and have no other options to pay, that's obviously not a good experience. Additionally, many low-income consumers use reloadable or single-use credit cards to make purchases. And if Vermont is trying to increase the EV and PHEV adoption among lower-income Vermonters, making the policy goal consistent with the payment method will be important. And then some EV/SE vendors have argued that the cost of the credit card readers is cost prohibitive. However, most vendors, such as Electrify America, and also charging station manufacturers, include this as a feature of their equipment. So it's actually a not very expensive technology, and many major cities have a credit card reader on every single parking meter on the streets. I know that Renewable Energy Vermont really would like us to not have this requirement. I know that ChargePoint has lobbied the state and perhaps Rev as well to try and get that requirement removed. But at this time, we feel it's very important to have, a consistent and, really accessible system available. In particular, I think that piece on the low-income Vermonters who use the reloadable card. So that's where we stand.
Thank you. A real quick follow-up, Chair.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I'm never going to overrule or push back against Michelle. What I would love to just have clarity on is that they provided me some documentation on this, and they made the case that Vermont is out of step by requiring this, and that all of our regional or comparisons are really moving away from this chip reader or the swipe requirement. Again, if you have confidence, you said a regional partner, I'd love to confirm that, but I'd love to just reconcile what they're telling me with what you're saying as to, I'd hate for Vermont to have some antiquated standards requiring swipes when we increasingly want to have contactless, as well as more fiscally prudent. As you recognize, they also highlighted the point you just made, which is that it's more expensive to require the swipes. And I can't remember the last time I actually inserted my credit card in one of the Burlington meters. So I'd just love to confirm that Vermont's not out of step with our neighbors, and I don't know how to do that, but maybe I'll do some digging.
Maybe another alternative is not have quite as prescriptive language that allows, as technology or NESCOM, you said, might change whatever requirements are, so that we don't have to make statutory changes, but there could be an automatic alignment of whatever is agreed upon, so that we've done that in other cases as it might relate to federal laws that change. So I'm just wondering, maybe there's some way of recognizing that the future could be very different than today and not get locked in. And so it allows that more dynamic response to whatever is agreed upon a year from now or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great point, Senator Kitchell. And I think that I will follow up, Senator Chittenden, with our NESCOM partners to see where each state is. Currently, there's no requirement in statute relative to what methodology we use, but we've adopted an internal policy as we've been rolling out the grant program for EVSE to be consistent with NESCOM. And so I'll check on that. I agree that we need to be flexible as we move forward because this is an evolving area.
Yeah, I would just,
Yes, Senator Burchett, go ahead.
just to add to that, that it's, like Michelle just said, it's not a statutory requirement. Any private EVSE manufacturer or supplier can just put in one without a credit card. So it's not, we're not requiring all electric vehicle stations to have credit card. It's only if you're going to get a grant. So we're saying, if you're taking this public money, we want these publicly funded stations to be as accessible as possible.
So just to follow up on that, Senator Perchlik is correctly describing what the statute says, and I pulled it up because I wanted to make sure. So if electric vehicle supply equipment is available to the public, there are multiple requirements. One of which is that you need to provide multiple payment options that allow access by the public if a fee is required, and shall not require to pay a subscription fee in order to access the charging station. So the statute does say you just need to have multiple payment options.
That helps to know that it's only grant specific, that you have to do this if you get the grant. So thank you.
Okay, all right.
I can continue. I also know that I have now butted up against both your break and your next scheduled witness.
How much longer you think you have?
So you have a proposal from Senator Perchlik on an annual map. You also then have language that you've already heard about zero transit, having it be approved by the governing body of the transit agency. You've got a small proposed change from the agency on the sign requirement related to banners. You then have the Act 250 language, which I think is substantial-ish.
I think we'll take a break and then
Okay.
continue. Why don't we take our break now? We'll see everybody at 11 o'clock, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Senator Mazza? Hi, sorry.